Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Smart podcast. We're diving deep into English tenses today. You know those fascinating time machines of grammar? You've been working hard to get a handle on this essential part of the language. So we're here to help you unlock those secrets.
Yeah, we're going to be exploring each of the 12 tenses, and not just how to form them, but how they can really help you communicate more effectively and add nuance to your speech and your writing.
Okay, cool. So before we get into the specifics, I think it'd be helpful to zoom out. Look at the bigger picture. How are these 12 tenses organized? Is there some sort of system to it?
Well, you can think of it as three main families: simple, perfect, and continuous. And each family has a distinct purpose and kind of lays the groundwork for understanding each of those individual tenses.
It's like the building blocks of time.
Exactly. Simple tenses are the foundation. They cover actions happening regularly, in the past and future. Think of them as the workhorses of everyday communication.
Yeah, I can see that. We use them all the time without even thinking about it. What about the other families? The perfect and continuous tenses. Those sound a bit more complex.
They do add a layer of complexity, but they also allow for much richer, more nuanced expression. Perfect tenses, for instance, connect actions to different points in time, showing how the past, present, and future kind of intertwine. For example, if you say, "I have eaten," you're not simply stating that you ate at some point, but also implying that you're full now, in the present.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like the perfect tense adds like a hidden layer of meaning, a connection between the past and present. What about the continuous tenses? What makes them special?
Continuous tenses focus on actions that are in progress. They really highlight the duration, the development. They're like the action verbs of grammar. They bring movement and vibrancy to language. So instead of just saying "I walk," you can say "I am walking," which emphasizes the action as it unfolds.
Okay, I'm starting to get a sense of how these families differ. Now I'm ready to dive into those individual tenses themselves. Where should we start?
Let's begin with the present simple. It's the most basic and perhaps the most frequently used tense. It's the real workhorse of the English language, used to express facts, habits, and even scheduled events in the future.
Right, like the sun rises in the east, or the train leaves at 86 tomorrow morning. So simple and straightforward statements about facts and schedules.
Exactly. And forming the present simple is usually pretty simple. For most verbs, you just use the base form, adding an S or es for third-person singular subjects.
So like I walk, he walks, she eats, it sleeps. Easy peasy. But what about those tricky irregular verbs in the past tense? Those always trip me up.
Ah, yes, irregular verbs. They can be a bit challenging, but they add, a touch of quirkiness to the language. And what's fascinating is that many of them have roots in Old English. So they're holding a piece of history within their forms. Like, for example, go becomes went, and eat turns into ate. They don't follow that regular ed pattern, but they're like these little time capsules within our language.
I've never thought of it that way. That makes them seem less intimidating and a lot more interesting. So tell me more about the past simple tense. It seems like we use it constantly to talk about things that have already happened.
We do. The past simple is our go-to tense for narrating events, sharing experiences, and recounting history. It's how we talk about what we did yesterday, what we ate for breakfast, or even significant events from the past.
So if I were to say, I walked to the park yesterday, or I ate a delicious breakfast this morning, those would both be examples of the past simple.
Exactly. And for regular verbs, forming the past simple is as simple as adding ed to the base form. But of course, we have those delightful irregular verbs that like to keep us on our toes.
Right. Go becomes went, eat becomes ate, and so on. It seems like those irregular verbs are a constant reminder that language is full of surprises and exceptions to the rules. What about the future simple tense? How do we express those actions that haven't happened yet?
The future simple tense allows us to look ahead and talk about predictions, intentions, and plans. It's how we express what we will do, what we think might happen, or what we hope to achieve in the future.
So if I were to say, I will travel to Italy next year, or I think it will rain tomorrow, those would both be examples of the future simple.
Precisely. And the formation is straightforward. It's will plus the base form of the verb, I will travel, you will learn, they will explore. It paints a picture of what's to come.
This is making so much sense. I'm starting to feel like I can really grasp these simple tenses. Now, I'm curious to learn more about those more complex families, the perfect and the continuous tenses. What kind of time-bending adventures await us there?
Well, prepare to have your mind slightly bent, because those families add a whole new layer of nuance and meaning to our understanding of time But are you ready to delve into this fascinating world of perfect tenses?
Absolutely. I'm eager to see how these tenses can add that depth and nuance to my communication.
Perfect tenses do just that. They express a connection between different time frames, adding layers of meaning that go beyond simply stating when something happened.
So it's not just about the when, but also the relationship between different points in time.
Exactly. Let's start with the present perfect tense, which connects the past to the present. It's formed with have or has, plus the past participle of the verb.
Okay, I'm familiar with the structure, but could you give me an example of how it's used in a way that highlights that connection between past and present?
Certainly. Consider the sentence, I have lived in London for 5 years. This tells us that you started living in London 5 years ago, and you continue to live there today. The action began in the past, but has a direct relevance to the present moment.
So it's not just about a completed action in the past, but an action that has this lasting impact on the present.
Precisely. It's like a bridge between the past and the present, showing how past actions can shape our current reality. Now, let's step back in time even further with the past perfect tense. This tense is particularly useful when we want to clarify the order of events that happened in the past.
So it's like creating a timeline of events within a story.
Exactly. The past perfect helps us establish a clear sequence of events, showing what happened before something else in the past. For example, imagine you're telling a story about a time you missed your train. You could say, I had already arrived at the station when I realized I had forgotten my ticket at home.
I see. The past perfect tense, I had arrived, shows that arriving at the station happened before the realization of forgetting the ticket.
Precisely. It helps the listener understand the order of events clearly and avoids any confusion. Now let's journey to the future with the future perfect tense. This tense allows us to imagine a future point in time and talk about actions that will be completed by then.
So it's like setting a milestone in the future and looking back from that point.
That's a great way to think about it. Imagine it's Monday and you have a project due on Friday. You could say, by Friday afternoon, I will have finished my project.
Okay, I see. You're looking ahead to Friday and envisioning that project as being completed by that time.
Exactly. The future perfect tense allows us to express this sense of future completion. Now, are you ready to explore the dynamic world of continuous tenses?
Absolutely. I'm ready to see how these action-packed tenses can bring my language to life.
Continuous tenses are all about capturing action as it unfolds, emphasizing that ongoing nature and duration. They're like a movie camera, zooming in on the process, rather than just the start and finish.
I love that analogy. It paints such a vivid picture in my mind. Can you give me an example of how the present continuous tense brings this sense of action to life?
Of course. Instead of saying, I read a book, you could say, I am reading a book. The present continuous tense emphasizes that the action is happening right now, in the present moment.
So it's like a snapshot of the action as it's happening. What about the past continuous tense? How did that capture the flow of events in the past?
The past continuous tense transports us back to a specific point in the past and shows us an action that was in progress at that moment. Imagine you're setting the scene for a story. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the beach as children were laughing and playing in the sand.
Oh, I can practically see that scene unfolding in my mind. The past continuous tense really creates that sense of immersion in the moment. What about the future continuous tense? How does that allow us to envision actions unfolding in the future?
The future continuous tense allows us to peek into the future and see an action in progress at a specific point in time. For example, imagine you're planning a trip. You could say, this time next week, I will be exploring the ancient ruins of Rome.
Wow, that's amazing. It's like we have this time machine that allows us to witness events unfolding in different time frames.
Exactly. These tenses provide us with these powerful tools to navigate those complexities of time and language. And with practice, you'll be able to use them effortlessly to express yourself with clarity, precision, and nuance.
This has been an incredible journey through the world of English tenses. I'm feeling much more confident about my ability to use them correctly and creatively.
That's fantastic to hear. Remember, language learning is an ongoing process, and the more you practice, the more natural and intuitive these tenses will become.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to put these tenses into practice, experiment with them in my writing and conversations. Do you have any tips on how to make these tenses feel less like, grammatical rules and more like natural tools for expression?
That's a great question. I think one of the keys is to focus on the meaning behind each tense and how it can help you convey your message more effectively. For example, if you want to emphasize the ongoing nature of an action, the continuous tenses are your go-to tools. If you're telling a story and need to clarify the order of events, the past perfect is your best friend.
So it's about thinking about what I want to say and then choosing the tense that best fits that intention.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to experiment. Play around with different tenses, see how they change the nuances of your sentences, and find what feels most natural and expressive for you.
I love that approach. It takes away the pressure of, memorizing all the rules.
Wow.
And instead, it encourages exploration and creativity. Are there any specific exercises or practices that you would recommend for someone who wants to really master these tenses?
Absolutely. One thing you can do is pay attention to how different tenses are used in the books, articles, and podcasts you consume. Notice how writers and speakers utilize tenses to create different effects and convey specific meanings.
That's a great idea. It's like learning by osmosis, absorbing the nuances of language from the masters. What about active practice? Are there any exercises that can help to solidify our understanding and improve our fluency?
Certainly. One effective technique is to take a simple sentence and rewrite it using all 12 tenses. For example, you could start with the sentence, I walked to the park, and then create variations like, I am walking to the park, I have walked to the park, I had walked to the park, and so on. This exercise helps you internalize the different forms and really grasp those subtle shifts in meaning.
That's a fantastic exercise. It's a simple yet powerful way to really get a feel for how each tense functions. I think that's one of the key takeaways from this deep dive, that importance of practice and active engagement with the language.
Absolutely. Language learning is a journey, not a destination. It's about embracing the process, experimenting, and finding joy in the nuances of communication. And the more you immerse yourself in the language, the more natural and intuitive it will become.
I completely agree. This deep dive has been incredibly insightful and inspiring. I'm feeling much more confident about my ability to navigate the complexities of English tenses and use them to express myself with greater clarity, precision, and nuance.
That's wonderful to hear. Remember, language is a powerful tool for connection, for expression, and for understanding. And as you continue to explore and master those nuances of English tenses, you'll unlock a whole new level of fluency and artistry in your communication.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure learning from you.
The pleasure was all mine. It's always inspiring to see someone so passionate about language learning.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of English tenses. We hope you feel empowered to embrace those complexities of time and language, and to use these powerful tools to express yourselves with confidence and creativity.
Keep practicing, keep exploring, and keep those language skills sharp.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Speak Smart podcast. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning.
And thank you for listening to the Speak Smart podcast.